The chamber is open and full of whispers.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description. Exclusive timelines, members-only videos you won't find anywhere else, all on our Patreon. The house is not asleep. The house never sleeps. It watches. It listens through its wallpaper and its portraits, and the persistent chill that lives in its east corridor, regardless of the season. Harry has spent 3 weeks learning its rhythms. The way a particular floorboard on the second landing groans at 1 a.m. when someone performs a sweep, the faint blue light that appears under Moody's door on the nights he decides to trust no one. He's learned which kinds of silence are safe. This one is not. He descends the stairs in the dark. Third step from the top, wait on the left edge. Fourth step, skip. Landing outside Mrs. Weasley's door, pause, breathe, continue. He has rehearsed this for 6 nights without executing it, waiting until he was certain. Tonight he is certain. The Black Library is at the end of the East Corridor behind a door that Sirius showed him once, briefly with the expression of a man pointing out a loaded weapon he'd rather not discuss. It sits at the end of its own small hallway, unlisted in any household catalog. The air inside is different from the rest of the house. Colder, heavier in the throat. The smell is leather and iron and something older than both, something that came with the books instead of the building. Hermione is already there. She doesn't look up. 3 books open in front of her, a 4th pinned flat by her left forearm. The lamp she's conjured sits low on the table, casting shadows up the spines of the shelves in long vertical lines. She has clearly been here for hours. A ceramic dish on the corner of the table holds ash. She has been burning notes, which means she has been here long enough to write things she no longer wants to exist. Close the door, she says quietly. Then, pulling her wand from the table, Silencio, she casts the charm herself, directing it at the door, the walls, the floor. I don't trust the walls in this house. He closes the door, then he pulls out the chair across from her and sits down. Neither of them speaks immediately. There isn't a word for what they are doing here yet. There will be one by morning. Right now, it is just 2 15-year-olds in a room full of things that predate them by centuries, on the verge of a decision that will not be undone. How's the hand? Hermione asks. Harry looks at his right palm. The skin is unmarked physically, but there is something underneath it, a low, persistent ache that started in the graveyard 3 weeks ago and has not quieted since. The residue of Wormtail's knife, of blood given without consent to restore a body that should have stayed in the ground. Fine, he says. She doesn't believe him. He doesn't ask her to. She moves the uppermost book aside. From beneath it, she withdraws a single piece of parchment, folded precisely in thirds. She unfolds it on the table between them and turns it to face him. It is covered in her smallest, tightest handwriting, the script she uses when she is doing mathematics, and there is no room for anything but precision. 12 items. Numbered, dated. I wrote it the night we came back from the infirmary, she says. I couldn't sleep. He reads. The first item is from 1981, a documented sequence of events, reconstructible from order records Hermione has already identified in the library's secondary archive, establishing that Dumbledore received the prophecy before Voldemort did, that he made decisions about what to do with it, that those decisions placed an infant in a house on Privet Drive and left him there for 14 years as insurance against a future he had already calculated. The second item is from 1991, a note in Hagrid's possession, photographed without Hagrid realizing. Dumbledore's handwriting, instructions for the Mirror of Erised, written before Harry's first term began. The trap was designed before Harry arrived at Hogwarts. The 11-year-old was never a student discovering something dangerous. He was the final lock on a vault. The third item, the chamber. A documented timeline of when Dumbledore was informed of each petrification, cross-referenced against when he took action, a 6-week gap. During that gap, a 12-year-old and his friends were the only investigation the school had. Harry keeps reading. By the 7th item, he has stopped feeling anything he would call betrayal. Betrayal requires surprise. What he is experiencing instead is quieter than that. The sensation of a map laid over a landscape you have been walking for years, finally allowing you to understand its shape. Every path he thought he chose freely, the specific distances between things. He has been managed, carefully, consistently, with what he is sure is genuine affection, because Dumbledore is not a cruel man, but managed the way you manage a variable in an equation you've already solved, adjusting its position to preserve the outcome you need. The 12th item is dated 3 weeks ago. It is a copied extract. Hermione sources everything from an order memorandum circulated the morning after the third task, Dumbledore's strategic position paper on the return of Voldemort. 4 pages, measured, thorough. Harry's name appears once. As a pronoun, the proposed strategy is patience. Reinforcement, waiting for Voldemort to expose himself. A holding action, survival until the circumstances became more favorable. Not victory, survival. Harry sets the parchment down. He does not fold it. He's going to do this again, he says. He already has, Hermione says. That memorandum was written before Cedric's parents had been told. She says it without heat, the way you state a measurement. He didn't pause to grieve. He had a plan within hours. We were not in it. The lamp flame wavers once. Not magic, just old brass and a tired wick. The house settles into its bones around them. What do you want to do? Harry asks. She looks at him steadily. She is not asking for his permission. She already knows what she wants. She is asking if he is ready to hear it. I want to stop being a piece, she says, on Dumbledore's board or Voldemort's board or anyone else's. I want to be the hand that moves. A pause. I think you've wanted the same thing for a long time. You just haven't had a name for it. He looks at the parchment on the table, at 12 dated entries that together describe a structure he was inside, without ever being told the shape of it. What's the name for it? Authority, she says. Real authority, not assigned. Claimed. The script inside predates any language Harry has studied. Not runic, not Latin, something older than both systems. She has annotated it throughout, arrows and penciled translations in the margins. She has clearly been reading this for more than one night. The Black family called it a pact of sovereign intent. She says, it isn't dark magic, it isn't light magic either. It's older than that distinction from before the ministry existed to draw the line. 2 magical cores, bound by freely given blood, declaring a shared objective to magic itself. She closes the book, magic then enforces it. Not the Wizengamot, not Dumbledore, the original kind, the kind that was here before wands. What does it actually do? It makes the declaration real. Not legally, not yet. That comes after. What it does tonight is register the intention in the magical record. The way a birth registers, she meets his eyes, we become something different, and we can't become what we are right now. Harry is quiet. He lets the weight of that settle rather than deflecting it. Cedric Diggory is in the ground. His parents sat in the corridor at St. Mungo's last week and could not look at each other. Voldemort is awake, already building, and the man who has known this was coming for 14 years is writing 4-page memoranda about patience. Show me the ritual, Harry says. It takes 2 hours. Hermione is precise about the preparation. The table cleared and cleaned, specific symbols copied from the book onto the bare wood in a compound she mixes from 3 sources on the lower shelves. Not ink. The compound absorbs into the grain of the table rather than sitting on its surface, becoming structural to the wood rather than applied to it. They sit across from each other. She holds a small iron blade she found referenced in the Black family records. Iron, not steel, older than either of their wands by several centuries. Left hand, she says, the off hand. Why? The wand hand is what you give to magic, she says quietly. The off hand is what you keep for yourself. We're giving this to each other. He extends his left hand across the table. She takes it and makes the cut across his palm. Clean, precise, shallow. He doesn't look away. She makes the same cut on her own without changing her expression. They press their palms together. The symbols on the table deepen, not dramatically, no light, no sound. They simply become more present the way ink looks in the final seconds of drying. The same marks, but settled now, fixed, belonging to the surface in a way they didn't before. State your intent, Hermione says. We take the authority that was taken from us, Harry says. We build something that doesn't require a Dumbledore to manage it. We end this war rather than survive it. And we do it together, she says, not as instruments, as architects. The symbols hold still. That is all. No spectral fire, no voice from the old magic confirming what they've done. It is simply 2 sets of bleeding palms and a table that now contains the oldest kind of record. One that doesn't require the ministry to validate it, because the ministry did not exist when this form of record was established. Hermione wraps his hand first. Clean cloth, pulled from her bag with the practiced efficiency of someone who planned for this specific outcome. 2 neat knots. He ties hers. On the corner of the table sits an envelope, cream-colored parchment, Dumbledore's handwriting on the front. Harry has carried it for 3 weeks, picking it up from the infirmary bed the morning after the graveyard, and never opening it, because every time he reaches for the flap he feels the considered care of it, the words of a man writing to his variable, choosing what to include, choosing what to withhold, preserving the outcome he needs. Harry picks it up now. He looks at it for a moment, then he holds it over the lamp. The paper catches cleanly. He sets it in the stone dish on the corner of the table and watches it finish. The ash settles gray against the ceramic. He feels for the first time since the graveyard nothing that resembles fear. 12 points, he says. 12 points, Hermione agrees, and we haven't opened the ledger yet. She pulls it across the table, opens it to the first page. They begin. Harry is holding a book that has no title on its spine. It is bound in something that is not leather. He has learned over 3 weeks to recognize the difference. Leather carries a complete absence of intent, the way all dead materials do. This binding has neither. When he first picked it up 5 days ago, his scar gave a single low pulse. Not pain, more like a compass needle adjusting its bearing. He set it down immediately and told Hermione. She spent a day and a half examining it before she was willing to let him touch it again. Now she's cleared it. It is not dark, she told him. It is simply old enough to remember things. He sets it in the pile on his left. That pile is for Gray. The organizational system is Hermione's. She established it on the 3rd day when it became clear that the Black family's own taxonomy, organized by bloodline and consequence rather than any conventional subject system, was going to be functionally useless for their purposes. 3 piles, 3 designations. The right pile, dark. Not to be used. Documented, catalogued, locked inside the secondary cabinet, Hermione reinforced, with 4 layered wards. Some of these books are simply illegal. Others are worse. The kind of magic that leaves residue in the practitioner the way certain compounds leave residue in the vessel they're stored in. Long-term. Structural. The Black family collected them the way some families collected evidence of old victories, proof of what they'd been capable of. The left pile, Gray. These are the books that predate the Ministry's classifications entirely. They were written when there was no regulatory body to decide what category a thing belonged to, when magic was simply a question of cost and precision rather than permission. They are not cruel texts. They are consequential ones. Each ritual inside them requires something specific from the person performing it. Clarity of intent, payment in some form, a willingness to accept what the magic returns. They do not permit half measures. They were written for people who had already decided. This is what distinguishes them from dark magic, Hermione told him, the night she first identified the category. Dark magic takes. Gray magic exchanges. The middle pile, standard or near standard. Light, in the Ministry's language, these are the books of a family that occasionally worked within the approved system, usually when it served them. The middle pile is the smallest by a significant distance. Read me the entry again, Harry says. Hermione doesn't look up from the gray text she's annotating. She has the relevant page of her notebook memorized. The marking is not a compulsion, she recites. It does not direct the will of the marked. It identifies them, to each other, to the one who performed the marking, and to the magic that records such things. A mark is a recognition, not a chain. It cannot be used to command. It can only be used to find. Harry sets down the untitled book. But they don't know they've been marked. No, she says, they don't. He is not looking for her to tell him this is clean. They both know it isn't clean. The question is whether it is necessary, and they have already had that argument twice and arrived at the same conclusion both times. They are building a network, not coercing one. They are identifying people who will, when the moment comes, make the choice Harry and Hermione have already made, the choice to act rather than wait, to claim rather than defer. The mark doesn't create that quality in a person. It reads for it. What it finds must already be there. The magic identifies. It does not manufacture. Who first? Harry asks. Hermione opens her notebook to a page she has been developing for several days. 12 names currently, each one annotated, not with impressions, with documented evidence. Observed behaviors. Specific moments drawn from 4 years of shared proximity, assembled into profiles. Neville Longbottom, loyalty structural rather than situational, acts under duress without recalculating, responds to the question of what is right before the question of what is safe. Luna Lovegood operates outside consensus reality to a degree that makes her functionally immune to institutional propaganda, cannot be managed by people who require her to want what they want. Ginny Weasley, 6 years of systematic underestimation have produced something the underestimators are not prepared for. Ambition pointed outward. Patience that has not been mistaken for passivity by anyone who has actually watched her. Each entry is precise in the same way. Each one is a reading of a person that goes deeper than friendship, because friendship is not the foundation they are building on. What they are building requires a different kind of knowledge, the kind that holds when the stakes have grown past the relationship. Neville first, Hermione says, when term starts. Somewhere quiet, the marking takes about 40 seconds and leaves no visible trace. Harry nods. He picks the untitled book back up, opens it to the section Hermione flagged with a strip of parchment. The text is in a script he cannot read directly, but that Hermione has partially translated in the margins in pencil. What she's written is enough. He reads it twice. Then he sets it down. This is what they used for the Fidelius, he says. A precursor to it, she says. The modern Fidelius routes through the ministry's infrastructure when it's cast. There's a registration mechanism built in since 1942 that most casters don't know about. This version doesn't route through anything. The secret exists only in the caster and the keeper. And you think you can cast it, she says, without looking up. It requires 2 cores, specifically 2 cores that have made a prior declaration to each other. She finally looks at him, which is why it's in the left pile and not the middle one. It is Creature who leads them to the locket. Not intentionally, Creature does not intend things for their benefit. But on the 11th day of cataloging, when they work their way into the storage corridor behind the library's secondary shelving, Harry feels something he has not felt since Privet Drive. His scar tightens. Not pain. A pressure, directional and specific, like a compass needle pointing at something it doesn't have a word for. He stops walking. Harry, Hermione says. He turns toward the source. There is a locked cabinet at the far end of the corridor. Iron, dark, sitting separate from the other storage furniture in the particular way that objects keep their distance from things that should not be approached. And crouched beside the cabinet, watching Harry with enormous wet eyes, and something that is not quite fear and not quite guilt, and is perhaps closer to grief, is Creature. What is in that cabinet? Harry says. Creature does not answer. Creature, Harry's voice is level. What is in the cabinet? Master Regulus's. Creature says. The syllables come out cracked, effortful. Master Regulus told Creature to destroy it. Creature tried. Creature could not. Master Regulus died and Creature could not destroy it, and Creature has kept it safe because Master Regulus said destroy it and Creature failed and... Show me, Harry says. The cabinet opens. Inside, on a folded piece of velvet, sits a locket, heavy gold, serpentine-esque carved into the surface. It catches the lamplight with a quality that has nothing to do with the angle of the light. Harry's scar pulses again, hard. He does not reach for it. Hermione has already stepped forward. Not to touch it, to read it. She passes her notebook over the cabinet opening, examining the magical signature with the same focused attention she brings to everything. Her expression changes in the specific way it changes when she encounters something she did not expect to encounter. This is older than anything else in this house, she says quietly. The dark content of it, this isn't decoration, it isn't just a cursed object. She looks at Harry. There is something inside it, something that is not the metal and not the enchantment, but is. She stops, reorganizes. Something is anchored to this. Harry thinks about everything he has read in the Grey texts since they arrived. About soul theory, which appears in the earliest volumes treated as foundational mechanics rather than dark invention. About what it would mean to take a piece of a soul and bind it to an object. Horcrux, he says. He did not know the word 3 weeks ago, he knows it now. Hermione goes still. That's what a Horcrux looks like, Harry says. She looks at the locket, looks at him. She has read the same texts. She reaches the same conclusion in approximately 4 seconds. Then we cannot destroy it, she says. Not tonight. Not with what we currently know how to do. We need the right methodology. They place the locket inside. Hermione adds 3 suppression layers from the Grey texts, working them into the box's interior with the compound they have been using for the table rituals. The cold quality in the air around the cabinet diminishes. Creature watches them work. When they close the box, he lets out a long, cracked sound that is not quite a word. Master Regulus wanted it destroyed, he says. We will destroy it, Harry says, when we know how to do it properly, when we have what we need. He looks at the house elf. We will not fail him the way you're afraid of. I promise you that. They seal the box. carry it to the primary vault room. Hermione inscribes the door with a ward she has been refining for a week, the highest-level containment work she can produce in August 1995. She marks the locket in her notebook, not under library catalog, under a new heading, opened on a fresh page. Horcruxes. Confirmed 1. Location vault. Methodology required. She uncaps her pen. The bribery ledger is not where Hermione expected to find it. She is working the northeast corner of the library, following a chain of footnotes she has been tracing for 4 days through 3 separate gray texts. The Black family cross-reference their own collection in a system that reveals itself only to people who are already inside it, who have already read the right sequence of books in something approaching the right order. She has been patient about this. Patience is the primary skill the library demands. She pulls a book from the shelf expecting inventory records. The Black family kept meticulous accounts of their vault holdings, and she has found 3 such inventories already this week. This volume is octavo-sized, plain dark cloth binding, nothing on the exterior. She opens it. The first page contains a column of names. Beside each name, a number, a date, and a ministry department. She reads the first entry, then reads it again, sets the book flat on the table, and does the currency conversion in her head twice, because the first result seems wrong. It is not wrong. She turns the page, more names, more decades. The departments shift: magical law enforcement, the Wisengamot Administrative Office, the Office for the Detection and Confiscation of Counterfeit Defensive Spells and Protective Objects. The names cycle with each generation, but the structure is fixed. Name, amount, date, department, and in a final narrow column, a single-line notation of what the payment secured. She turns pages without speaking. The record is meticulous. Whoever maintained it understood that documentation of this kind serves 2 purposes: as a record and as leverage, because a payment recorded is a payment that can be proved. The entries run from 1891 to 1979, 2 years before the end of the First War, 2 years before the Black family's primary political infrastructure collapsed. She closes the book. Harry. He is in the far corner, cross-legged on the floor with the untitled gray text. He looks up at her expression. He closes his book and comes over. She opens the ledger to the middle section and turns it toward him. He reads the first entry, then the next 4. Then he looks up. How far back does it go? 1891. He looks at the thickness of the volume. Fudge, she says quietly, turning to a page she has already marked. 3 entries, 1990, 1992, 1994. The amounts are not the largest in the ledger, but the notations beside them are specific enough that there is only one reading of them. The 1992 entry references a decision made by the Department of Magical Law Enforcement in September of that year. Harry was at Hogwarts in September of 1992. He remembers what happened, the decisions that were made and the ones that were not made, the ministry's movements and its absences. He remembers them differently now. He knows, Harry says, not a question. He's been paid to know and act accordingly, Hermione says. 3 consecutive payments, each tied to a specific outcome. She closes the ledger, holds it for a moment, feeling the weight of what is inside it. He's not incompetent. He never was. A pause. He's contracted. She crosses to her bag. She pulls out a new notebook, the 4th since they began in this library. She opens it to the first page. At the top, in her tightest script, she writes a heading. The ministry file, active. Below it, Cornelius Fudge. 3 documented payments, dates, amounts, secured outcomes. She uncaps her pen. She begins to write. The lift descends. Harry watches the level indicators pass, 9, 8, 7, and does not adjust his grip on the document folder under his arm. It is a slim folder, 12 pages. Hermione assembled it over 4 days, had him review it 3 times, and then had him review it again without looking at the pages to ensure he could reconstruct any section from memory. He can. The lift stops at level 10. He steps out into the corridor. It is longer than any corridor that should exist this far underground, lit by torches that cast orange light onto stone walls and produce no warmth. The air carries the particular quality of a place designed to make people feel small. The ceiling's too high, the doors too heavy, the scale of everything calibrated to remind whoever is walking through it that the institution dwarfs them. Harry walks at a measured pace, not quickly, not slowly. At the far end of the corridor outside the entrance to courtroom 10, Dumbledore is waiting. He looks exactly as he always looks, half-moon spectacles, silver beard, robes of deep blue that suggest calm authority. He has the posture of a man who arrived early because he intended to be the one who set the terms of the room. He is holding his wand loosely at his side in a way that is not threatening, but is also not nothing. He sees Harry, and something in his expression shifts. A brief recalibration. "Harry," he says, "I arrived as soon as I could. I want you to know I intend to speak on your behalf today. I believe this hearing will be resolved quickly if we—" "Thank you, Professor," Harry says. "That won't be necessary." He walks past him and opens the door to courtroom 10. The full Wizengamot is assembled, 50 chairs arranged in ascending stone tiers, occupied by witches and wizards in plum-colored robes, with the W insignia stitched at the collar. Most of them are in their 50s or older. Some are considerably older than that, faces that have been performing this function long enough that the expression of judicial authority has become structural, worn into the bone. At the center of the raised dais, behind a desk that is elevated above everything else in the room, Cornelius Fudge, Minister for Magic. Beside him, Percy Weasley with a quill poised over parchment and the self-satisfied expression of a man who has recently been promoted. In the gallery above, one figure seated in the third row, left side where the sight lines are clear in every direction but the positioning is not conspicuous. Hermione looks at him briefly. Then she returns her attention to the proceedings. Harry takes the chair in the center of the room. It has chains attached to the armrests. They remain still. He sets the document folder on his knee. Fudge opens the session with the formal charge. Underage magic, the Patronus charm, cast in the presence of a muggle. Violation of the decree for the reasonable restriction of underage sorcery. He reads it with the tone of a man reading a verdict rather than an accusation. The outcome already understood. "You will have an opportunity to speak in your defense," Fudge says, not looking up from his parchment. "If you wish to enter a statement, before we address the charges," Harry says, "I wish to invoke a pre-existing legal protection." But the quality of its attention changes. Fudge looks up. "I beg your pardon, the right of the ancient houses," Harry says. Statute of 1692, predating the ministry's founding by 15 years. It grants recognized heads of ancient and noble houses immunity from prosecution by any body to which they have not formally sworn fealty. He opens the folder. "I am the direct blood descendant and acting heir of the Peveril line, the oldest documented magical lineage in Britain, classified in the Wizengamot's own genealogical registry as older still. I am also heir to the House of Potter, a family of continuous, documented magical standing for over 3 centuries. He looks at Fudge. "I have not sworn fealty to the Ministry of Magic. I have never been asked to, and no such oath appears in my family's legal record." A pause, "which means this body does not have jurisdiction to prosecute me." The silence that follows is not empty. It is occupied by 50 people consulting different versions of the same internal question. Whether this is true, and whether it matters if it is, Percy leans toward Fudge. A rapid, whispered exchange. Fudge straightens. His expression has moved past surprise into something that is performing confidence. That statute, he says, has not been invoked in over a century. It is largely considered defunct. Largely considered is not legally null, Harry says. The statute has never been formally repealed. I have the Wizengamot's own procedural records here documenting that. He removes 3 pages from the folder and holds them up. Pages 7 through 9. A repeal requires a 2/3 majority vote, formally entered into the record. That vote has never taken place. Another whispered exchange at the dais. Percy's quill is stationary. One of the senior Wizengamot members, a woman in the second tier with gray hair and the expression of someone who has been doing this long enough to recognize when a proceeding has gone wrong, leans forward slightly. "Minister, if the documentation is accurate..." "The documentation is accurate," Harry says. Fudge's composure is intact, but its foundations are doing something structurally uncertain. "Where did you obtain this information?" he asks. The question is aimed at Harry, but it is really aimed at whoever is responsible for the 15-year-old, sitting in the defendant's chair and dismantling a ministry prosecution with a folder of pre-1707 statute law. This is not material a student would have access to. "I'm not here as a student," Harry says. "I'm here as the heir of an ancient bloodline invoking a pre-existing legal right." He closes the folder. "But to answer your question, my solicitor." She has recorded the highest assessment scores at Hogwarts in living memory across every year of study completed to date. I'm told the records office had to create a new notation category. He doesn't need to. He can hear the footsteps already. Quiet, measured, the sound of someone who has been waiting for precisely this moment and has had considerable practice not appearing to rush. Hermione steps from the gallery to the floor of the courtroom. She is carrying her own folder, thicker than Harry's, with tabbed sections and annotations visible along the edges. She is 15 years old and she moves through the space as though she designed it. She takes a position to Harry's left without being directed to one. She does not introduce herself. She opens her folder. Hermione Granger, she says, for the record, acting solicitor for Harry James Potter, heir of the Peverell line and of the House of Potter. She looks at the assembled chamber with the particular steadiness of someone who has rehearsed for every counter-argument and found none of them sufficient. I have copies of the relevant statutes for all members of this body who would like to review them before we proceed. I would also draw the Chamber's attention to the precedent set in Blackwood versus the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, 1743, in which a similar invocation was upheld on the grounds that pre-administratively overridden by a body that did not exist when the law was written. She removes a stack of documents from the folder. Page 12 of the copies I'm distributing addresses this directly. Members of the Wizengamoth's lower tier begin passing parchment sheets along the rows. Fudge is looking at Hermione with an expression that has abandoned the pretense of judicial authority and become something more transparent. He is calculating. She can see him doing it. She has been watching people calculate their way toward or away from confrontation since she was old enough to understand that most arguments are lost before they begin. Minister, the gray-haired woman in the second tier says again. Her voice is quiet and carries entirely. Fudge sets down his pen. The vote takes 4 minutes. The specific mechanism of the right of the ancient houses is confirmed as legally extant by a show of hands that is not particularly close. Harry Potter is acquitted. The charges are formally withdrawn, entered into the record as withdrawn rather than dismissed, a distinction Hermione insisted on during preparation, because dismissed implies the charges had merit, and the case was simply closed, while withdrawn acknowledges the prosecution should not have been filed. Percy records it with the expression of someone who will need considerable time to reframe this afternoon. Harry stands. He takes the folder. He thanks the chamber. He does not thank Fudge. The corridor outside courtroom 10, Harry and Hermione walk toward the lift at the same measured pace he entered with. Behind them, the door to the courtroom is still open. Voices inside, low, fragmented. The sound of an institution reassessing something it assumed was settled. Dumbledore is still in the corridor. He watches them approach with the expression of a man absorbing new information about the shape of a situation he thought he understood. There is no calculation in it, not yet. It is simpler than that. He had a role today. He prepared for it. He does not have it anymore. That was very well done, he says quietly as they pass. Harry doesn't stop walking. Yes, he says, it was. The lift arrives. They step inside. The doors close. Hermione marks 3 items off the list in her notebook. Then she opens it to a fresh page. The next page already has a heading at the top written the night before. Year 5. Ongoing operations. She uncaps her pen. Ron notices the change in the 3rd week of term. It isn't dramatic. That's the first thing that unsettles him. That it isn't dramatic at all. He had been expecting something he could identify clearly. Something with edges. Because Harry and Hermione are his best friends and he knows them. And whatever happened over the summer was obviously significant, and significant things tend to announce themselves. This doesn't announce itself. It simply becomes apparent, the way a structural shift in a building becomes apparent. Not in any single moment, but in the accumulation of small evidence that something foundational has moved. Harry doesn't flinch anymore, that is the first thing. There have always been moments, in corridors and classrooms and situations where authority presents itself unkindly, where Harry produces a brief involuntary contraction. Not fear exactly, something subtler. The reflex of a person who grew up having his responses corrected. Ron has never named it aloud. He has simply known it was there, the way you know the sound of a friend's walk. It is no longer there. He watches Harry sit through a defense against the dark arts lesson. Umbridge at the front of the room, her voice carrying the particular sweetness of someone describing a cage, and Harry's face does not change. Not into the suppressed anger Ron knows. Into something else. Assessment. He is watching her the way you watch a problem you have already begun solving, cataloging information rather than reacting to it. Hermione is the same. She used to grip her quill when Umbridge spoke. Ron would watch her knuckles. They no longer whiten. He tries to ask questions. He tells himself this is the reasonable approach, that if something has shifted, the right thing to do is ask about it, because they are friends and friends talk. He catches Harry alone in the common room after breakfast on a Wednesday. "What are you doing?" he asks. He keeps his voice casual. Actually doing. The library trips. The separate study schedule, all of it. Harry looks at him. The look is not unkind. That is part of what makes it difficult. "We're preparing," Harry says. "For what?" "For everything Dumbledore isn't preparing for." Ron sits with this for a moment. "That's not an answer. It's the most accurate one I can give you." He tries Hermione next. He finds her in the library on a Thursday, alone at a corner table, 3 books open with the focused attention of someone who is not studying but extracting, reading the way a surgeon operates, taking specific things out and leaving the rest. He sits across from her. "What are you actually doing?" he asks. She marks her page, looks at him, gives him the same consideration she gives everything, complete and without condescension, which is somehow more difficult to receive than condescension would be. "We're building the infrastructure for what comes after," she says. "After what?" "After Voldemort. After the Ministry in its current form. After Dumbledore." She returns to her book. "The war ends eventually, Ron. Someone has to have decided what comes next before it does. Or what comes next is just the same architecture with different people in it." She does not ask him to leave. She also does not require him to say anything. And the silence is not uncomfortable so much as it is honest about a distance that has opened without either of them arranging it. He sees the marking in the first week of November. He is walking back from the Owlery on a Tuesday evening, taking the long corridor on the 4th floor because it's deserted, and he finds Harry and Neville Longbottom standing near a window. The conversation appears ordinary from a distance. 2 boys talking after dark, nothing remarkable. He is about to call out when something stops him. Harry's left hand rests briefly on Neville's shoulder. That is all it is. Brief, unremarkable as a gesture. But there is something in it that is not casual, a quality of intention that doesn't belong to the motion. Neville doesn't react visibly, doesn't seem to notice anything unusual, just nods at whatever Harry has said and moves on down the corridor. Harry turns and sees Ron. Neither of them speaks for a moment. "What was that?" Ron asks. "What was what?" Whatever that was." Harry is quiet for a beat. "I need you to trust me." "I do trust you, that's not what I'm asking." Ron doesn't have the precise language for it. That's the problem. What he saw was not dark magic. He knows what dark magic looks like, has seen enough proximity to it through the Weasley family's defensive history to recognize its texture. What he saw was something else, something that sits in no category he was given growing up, something that requires explaining and hasn't been explained to him. "I'm asking what you've become," he says. It comes out more simply than he intended. "Since the summer. I'm asking what you've become. Because you're different, and I can feel it, but I can't name it, and that scares me more than anything Voldemort has done." Harry leans against the stone wall. He doesn't look away. He doesn't begin a defense. "You're doing what he does," Ron says. "Dumbledore. Moving people around, deciding things about them without asking. You told me you hated that. You told me that was the thing you hated most about how he treated you, and now you're—" "I know. Then how can you—" "Because knowing it's the same doesn't mean it isn't necessary." Harry's voice remains level, not cold, not defended. Level, the way a wall is level, not emotional, functional. Dumbledore moves people toward a result he hasn't told them about. What we're doing is identifying people so that when the moment comes, they can make an informed choice. It's not the same thing. It looks the same from the outside, but the inside of it is different. "You're 15, Ron says. "We're 15. We're not supposed to be making these decisions. Nobody decided that for us. We just are." He has things he wants to say about what this is doing to Harry, about the version of his friend he recognizes less each week, about the way Hermione has developed a stillness that feels like armor, and whether armor is the same as strength. He has all of these things, and he cannot arrange them into an argument that lands, because every argument he builds, Harry meets with something that is not a counter-argument, but a fact, and facts do not respond to being disagreed with. "You're becoming what you're fighting," Ron says finally. It is not his most precise thought. It is the one that feels the truest. Harry says nothing for a moment. He does not dispute it. He stands in the corridor and considers Ron with the particular attention of someone taking careful measure of something they value. "Ron," he says quietly. "What? You're the best person I know?" "That's not a compliment anymore," Harry says. The corridor holds the weight of this. Ron does not speak to either of them for 2 weeks. He goes to classes and sits at the Gryffindor table and plays chess with Seamus, and watches Harry and Hermione from across whatever room they're all in, trying to construct the argument that dismantles what Harry said. He cannot find it. Not because it isn't there, because he suspects quietly that it is simply true, that goodness has become a category separate from usefulness, and that he is good, and that Harry loves him for it, and that none of that is enough for what is coming. He doesn't know what to do with this yet. He sits with it, the way you sit with a loss that hasn't finished arriving. Educational Decree number 24 is posted on a Thursday morning. By Saturday, something appears beneath it on the Gryffindor notice board. Not a counter-argument, not a complaint. A document, 2 pages, neat margins, formal script, citing Hogwarts Foundation Charter Article 14, subsection 3. A clause ratified by all 4 founders in the early years of the school's operation and never formally superseded, which established that the right of student assemblage for academic purpose could not be restricted by any external governing body without the written consent of the sitting headmaster and a 2/3 majority of the castle's permanent magical infrastructure. The castle's permanent magical infrastructure, not the ministry's. Hermione had found the clause in the 3rd week of September, in a Black family text that referenced Hogwarts founding documents as the template for their own household governance system. She had spent 4 days cross-referencing it against ministry records, looking for the repeal. There was no repeal. The ministry had simply assumed for 300 years that nobody would go looking. She had made 12 copies of the document, 1 for each house common room, 1 for the staff room notice board, 1 for the portrait corridor outside the defense classroom, and this one required the most careful timing, slid under the door of Dolores Umbridge's office at 3 in the morning on a Friday. That copy had a small annotation at the bottom in red ink, "For your records." The portraits are the operational layer nobody anticipates. They are everywhere in Hogwarts. Every corridor, every staircase, every office. They move between frames throughout the castle. A figure in a painting near the Transfiguration classroom can reappear in a frame outside the potions dungeon within minutes. They have done this for centuries. The ministry never thought to regulate portrait movement because portraits are not considered functional entities under wizarding law, which is a classification error that costs Umbridge her surveillance network before she finishes building it. Hermione begins cultivating the portrait network in October. Not all of them. Most of the portraits are decorative, landscapes or still lifes with no verbal capacity, but the portrait figures are another matter. She starts with Everard, a former headmaster whose frame appears in both Dumbledore's office and a small painting in the hospital wing. She explains what she is doing, not the blood pact, not the full architecture, just the immediate operational need. Everard listens. Then he says, "You want an intelligence network inside an institution that considers us furniture. Delightful. I've been waiting 200 years for someone to ask." Within 3 weeks, Hermione has access to what is effectively reported from every corridor, office and meeting room in the castle in which a portrait figure is present. Umbridge's movements, her schedule, the contents of staff meetings, which teachers are bending to her pressure and which are not. She is careful not to let Harry know the full scope of what she has built, not because she doesn't trust him, because the less he knows consciously, the less he can inadvertently signal. Harry's particular skill is authentic reaction. She needs him to be genuinely unaware of certain things so that when those things become relevant, his responses are real. By December, Umbridge is issuing decrees that the castle simply does not acknowledge. Educational Decree number 29 mandates that all non-curricular books be returned to the library by 5 in the evening and not borrowed again until the following morning. The library's enchanted catalog, tied to the same pre-1707 infrastructure Hermione has been invoking in her counter documents, continues issuing books at all hours. The library doors close at 11, as they always have. The decree might as well not exist. Educational Decree number 31 restricts student movement between house common rooms after 8 in the evening. The staircases rearrange themselves on the same schedule they always have. Movement is not inhibited. The staircase magic is older than the ministry and answers to nothing Umbridge can sign. She escalates. The escalation is predictable. Hermione mapped the probable escalation sequence in November and began preparing responses in advance. Each new decree meets a counter precedent within 48 hours, citing specific charter articles, with a documentation trail that would require ministry legal action to override, not administrative action, legal action. which would require the ministry to publicly acknowledge in open court that a school founded in 993 is governed by laws the ministry cannot simply rewrite. Fudge receives a summary of this situation from Umbridge in late January. He does not respond. She calls Harry to her office on a Wednesday in February. The room is pink in the way that some things are aggressively, purposefully pink. Not decoration, but assertion. Lace on every surface. Plates of kittens on the walls, the kittens moving in their painted loops. The fire is low. The desk is meticulously ordered. On the desk, a small glass bottle, clear liquid. 3 drops inside. Harry knows what it is. He knew before he arrived, because Everard reported the contents of Umbridge's office 4 days ago, and Hermione had looked at the list and gone still for precisely 6 seconds before writing a single line in her notebook and continuing. He sits in the chair she indicates. "Mr. Potter," Umbridge says, "I want you to understand that this conversation is an opportunity, not a punishment. I simply want the truth about certain activities I have reason to believe have been taking place in this school." "Of course, Professor," Harry says. She administers the veritaserum herself. 3 drops onto his tongue from the glass bottle with the professional precision of someone who has done this before. She watches his eyes for the slight glaze of full compliance, the visual confirmation that the potion has seeded. He lets his gaze soften slightly, blinks twice, looks at the middle distance the way you look at it when the content of your own mind becomes more immediate than your surroundings. She leans forward. "Are you Harry Potter, the organizer of an unauthorized student society operating within Hogwarts?" "No," Harry says. She writes this down. Her expression does not shift yet. Denials under veritaserum require careful follow-up. "Have you had any communication with Albus Dumbledore outside of supervised school settings since September?" "No." She writes this down. Her quill moves with the controlled satisfaction of someone building a record. "What did you do last night between the hours of 9 and 11? "I studied transfiguration," Harry says. Chapter 12 of Intermediate Transformative Theory. "I made notes on the properties of partial transfiguration and reviewed my practical results from Tuesday's lesson." Umbridge writes this down. Then she stops writing. Her quill rests against the parchment. She reads back what she has just transcribed. Then she looks at Harry. He is gazing at the middle distance with the cooperative blankness of a compliant subject. He looks exactly as he should look. She asks 2 more questions. He answers them both. The answers are mundane, specific, verifiable, and entirely without the information she came for. Not evasive, detailed, the kind of detail that is not the product of deflection but of honesty. She looks at the glass bottle on her desk, at the 3 drops of clear liquid she administered from the school's own stores, from the locked cabinet in the potions classroom, where the controlled substances are kept, which she had checked herself to confirm the label. The veritaserum label. The handwriting on that label is standard ministry issue. The wax seal is intact. The color of the liquid is correct. She administered 3 drops to Harry Potter 6 minutes ago, and he has told her, in complete and unguarded detail, that he spent last night studying transfiguration. She sits very still behind her desk. The kittens on the plates continue their painted loops. The fire is low. Harry waits with patient compliance for the next question. The look that crosses Umbridge's face is not anger. Anger belongs to a person who has lost a fight they knew they were in. What crosses her face is quieter than that and far worse. The expression of someone recalculating the shape of the last several months and finding that the dimensions are different from what she measured. If the potion is real, then Harry Potter has done nothing she can act on. If the potion is not real, then she has been operating inside a controlled environment for weeks, possibly longer, possibly since the beginning, while someone she dismissed as a 15-year-old child replaced the contents of a locked cabinet 3 weeks before she needed it. Either conclusion leaves her in the same position. "Thank you, Mr. Potter," she says. Her voice is level. "That will be all." Harry blinks, returns from his performed middle distance, stands, picks up his bag from beside the chair. He is almost at the door when she speaks again. Not because she intends to, but because the question has weight and she cannot hold it. "Who is helping you?" He turns. He looks at her with the particular expression of someone for whom this question has a clear answer, and clear answers do not require decoration. "I am," he says. He closes the door. The death chamber is circular and cold and older than any part of the ministry built around it. Harry has been here before. 3 minutes ago, in the chaos of the battle's final push, when the Death Eaters herded them through the wrong door and the room opened around them, and he understood immediately what it was. The stone tiers descending to the sunken pit. The archway at the center, 12 feet tall, freestanding, the veil hanging motionless in its frame despite the absence of any wind. The sound from it, not voices, not clearly, but something at the edge of the register that his ears have always tried and failed to resolve into language. He knows what the sound is now, he has read enough in the Black Library to know, but that is not the thought he is holding, not yet. Sirius falls the way light fails, suddenly, completely, and in the exact moment Harry is looking at him. 1 second he is there, fighting with the particular wild grace of a man who spent 12 years in a cell and is using every second of his freedom. The next, a curse clips his shoulder. Not the killing curse, something lighter, something that merely turns his balance the wrong direction. And he steps back once, twice, and the veil takes him. It takes him the way water takes a stone. Harry goes still. He is aware of Hermione's hand closing on his forearm, aware of the fight continuing around him, spells crossing the room, someone's voice rising, the sharp crack of stone hit at high velocity, but these things are registering in the far distance, the way sound travels to you across water when you are standing at the bottom of a deep place. Hermione's grip tightens. Her fingers are strong. She is not steadying him. She is holding him in. He understands why. Whatever is behind his eyes right now is not grief in its ordinary form. It is something older than grief, something that grief is only one surface of. It is the same thing that was in the graveyard, the same thing that took Cedric and rebuilt itself as the Blood Awakening and led them to the Black Library and through every decision they have made since. It is the knowledge of cost, of what it means to be in a war that does not care what you love. He does not make a sound. He fights the rest of the battle in the same stillness. The Death Eaters are broken and fleeing before the Order arrives. Order members will say later that there was something in Harry's manner during those final minutes. Not fury, not grief, not the visible force of someone acting from rage. Something more like a door that had been partially open for 15 years closing fully, the latch engaging, the structure finally complete. When it is over, when Voldemort has fled and Dumbledore has finally arrived and the Ministry personnel are flooding the atrium, Harry stands in the hall with Hermione's hand still on his arm. She is watching his face. He can feel her watching. "Not here," he says quietly. "I know," she says. She does not let go for another full minute. He returns at 2 in the morning. Under legal ordinary circumstances, the Ministry would not be accessible to him. But his status is not ordinary. The emancipation invoked at his hearing 8 months ago, the formal recognition of the Peverell and Potter bloodlines established in the record, places him in a legal category the Ministry has no precedent for revoking. The unspeakables who manage the Department of Mysteries know who entered their chambers tonight. They do not challenge the heir who walks back through their corridors in the small hours. The Peverell cloak covers him as additional assurance, but the legal standing is what matters. He has the right to be here. The Ministry's own records confirm it. He walks through the corridors, takes the lift to the 9th level, moves through the turning room, which recognizes no one, treats all comers equally, offers its 12 blank doors to every visitor, and enters the death chamber for the second time tonight. It is exactly as he left it. The stone tiers, the pit, the archway, the torchlight here does not flicker. It has not flickered, he thinks, in a very long time. It is the light of something that has been burning for centuries, in a room that has not changed, because what it contains does not require the changes that other rooms require. He descends to the pit, stops 5 feet from the arch. Up close, the veil is not cloth. He understood this in the abstract from the texts, but proximity confirms it physically. It has no weave, no fiber, no structural material he can identify. It hangs from the top of the arch and touches the stone floor, and in between those 2 points it is simply present. A threshold that exists because thresholds must exist, because the dead and the living occupy adjacent territories, and adjacency requires a membrane. He listens. He has been told by people who stood here before him that they heard voices, whispers from the other side. He understood this as sentimentality, the mind constructing comfort from ambiguous sensory input, manufacturing the voices of the dead because it cannot tolerate their absence. What he hears is not voices. It is structure, the architecture of the thing itself, its internal logic, the mechanism by which it maintains the boundary, the mathematics of what separates passage from presence. He can hear in the way you hear a building's design when you have stood inside enough buildings, the load-bearing points, the places where the threshold is thinnest, the original intention of the people who built this room, and why they built it here, and what they understood about death that the Ministry has since classified as either metaphysics or forbidden knowledge. He hears the foundation of it, And underneath the foundation, deeper than the mechanics, he hears the thing that the Peverell blood was always listening for: recognition. He raises his left hand, the hand with the blood-packed scar still faint on the palm. He does not reach through the veil. The texts in the Black Library were explicit on this. 3 separate entries from 3 separate centuries, all arriving at the same warning. The threshold is not a window. You cannot retrieve what has gone through. The membrane permits one direction passage only, and no exception has ever been documented. He reaches toward it. His fingertips stop an inch from the surface. The crown of the first king is not a physical object. He understands this in the moment of contact. It is a recognition in the magical record. The same record the Blood Pact wrote to, the same record that registered the Peverell line's first heir centuries before the Wizengamot existed. It is a legal standing that predates every institution that might otherwise claim authority over it, including the one housed in the building around him. It passes through his hand like cold water, like the river greeting Ignatus, like permission. Something settles in the room. It is not dramatic, the veil does not move, the torches do not change color, there is no sound he cannot attribute to the ordinary settling of old stone. But the room is different. He can feel the difference the way you feel a room after all the furniture has been moved a single inch. Each individual change invisible, the overall quality of the space unmistakable. The ancient carvings on the stone tiers, worn almost flat by centuries, catch the torchlight differently. Not because the torchlight has changed, because the carvings are responding to the presence of someone in the room who holds the blood that carved them. They are, in their carved and patient way, paying attention. The room has reoriented itself around him. He is standing at its center, not the physical center, which is several feet to his right, but the point toward which the room's original enchantments were always directed, the axis around which its ancient intention organized itself, waiting for an heir with the literacy to read it and the blood to claim it. He stands there for a long time. He does not feel powerful. He feels recognized, which is different. He feels the weight of what has been handed to him across 700 years of waiting, and the weight is considerable, and he accepts it the same way he accepted the blood pact, not with ceremony, but with the understanding of a person who has already decided. He hears footsteps on the stone tiers. He does not turn. The footsteps stop at the edge of the upper tier. He can feel the quality of the silence behind him, the specific silence of a man who has walked through many rooms containing many things in his long life, and has just walked into one that has arranged itself in a configuration he did not anticipate and cannot immediately categorize. Harry, Dumbledore says. Harry does not respond immediately. He looks at the veil, at the threshold that took Sirius. At the structure he can now read the way other people read a page, the mechanism and intention and load-bearing architecture of the oldest magic in Britain. He thinks about Sirius. He allows himself, privately and completely, to know that the man who taught him what family could look like is gone and is not coming back. He holds this knowledge as long as it requires to be properly held. Then he lets it become what it has been trying to become since the moment the veil closed. Fuel. He turns. Dumbledore is standing at the top of the stone tiers. His robes are disordered from the battle. His expression is the most unguarded Harry has ever seen it, all the careful management of it stripped away by the fact that he is looking at a 15-year-old boy standing in a room that is standing at attention around him. And Albus Dumbledore, who has an answer for everything, does not have an answer for this. The silence continues. Harry picks up the cloak from where he set it beside the arch. He folds it, tucks it under his arm. He climbs the stone tiers without speaking. He passes Dumbledore on the way to the door. Dumbledore watches him go and says nothing, not because he has chosen silence, but because for the first time in the narrative, silence is all he has. Draco Malfoy walks differently now. It is not something Ron can point to in any single element. Not the posture exactly, not the speed, not the particular quality of his expression. It is a composite thing, the aggregate of small adjustments that a person makes when the foundation they have always stood on is revealed to be narrower than they were told. Draco walks through the castle the way people walk through rooms where they are no longer certain they belong. Ron has been watching since January. He has also been watching Harry and Hermione watch Draco, and what he sees in their faces is not satisfaction and not cruelty. It is assessment. They are cataloging whether the decrease in Draco's certainty produces the result they intended, or a different one. This is the thing Ron cannot locate a clean feeling about. He has tried. He has spent 6 weeks constructing arguments against what Harry and Hermione are doing and dismantling them before they are finished, because each one reaches the same problem. The targets are real. Lucius Malfoy spent 30 years funding a dark resurrection. Rookwood fed information to Voldemort from inside the Ministry for years. The Knots, the Averys, the others, the documentation Hermione produced is not fabricated. The corruption it maps is not invented. The people being stripped of institutional standing were using that standing to hurt people. Ron cannot argue against the targets. What he cannot reconcile is the absence of a door. There is no mechanism in what Harry and Hermione have built for someone who is in the wrong to become less wrong. No procedure by which a person who has been part of a dark system can demonstrate they have separated from it and receive something other than the same treatment as those who haven't. The purge moves in one direction. It is a ratchet, it tightens, it does not loosen, and the tightening is permanent. Ron thinks about Percy. Percy, who spent 2 years on the wrong side of a ministry that was corrupt and wrong, who did it for reasons that were not good reasons but were comprehensible ones, who came back and who is still trying to come back, imperfectly and haltingly, in the way that actual people rather than theoretical people manage change. If Percy had been inside the system Harry and Hermione are dismantling, and he was, briefly adjacent to it, what would they have done with him? He cannot answer this question by asking Harry, because Harry would give him an answer that is honest and accurate, and would not resolve the thing that is wrong with it. He goes to Dumbledore on a Wednesday evening. Not to report, he is clear about this to himself, more than once, during the walk to the stone gargoyle on the 7th floor. He is not going to tell Dumbledore what Harry and Hermione have built. He is not going to describe the shadow government or the portrait network or the Gringotts coronation. He is going because Dumbledore represents something specific, the position that people contain the capacity for change, that the long view of a situation includes the possibility of redemption, that a system which removes the opportunity for people to become better is a system that has mistaken efficiency for justice. He needs to say this to someone who will not respond with a fact. Dumbledore opens the door to his office before Ron knocks. He says, "Come in, Ron. I've been hoping someone would visit. The evenings have been quiet." He makes tea. He asks about Ron's family. He listens to the question about the door, about mercy, about second chances, about whether a system that operates without them is categorically different from the system it's replacing, or only different in its beneficiaries. With the full attention of a man who has been waiting a long time for exactly this conversation. "You are asking," Dumbledore says quietly, setting down his cup, "whether the ends justify the means, whether a just outcome achieved through methods that preclude the possibility of forgiveness is actually just." "Yes," Ron says. "That's exactly what I'm asking." "It is the right question," Dumbledore says. "It is, in my view, the only question that matters. And the fact that you are asking it tells me something important about who you are." Ron sits back in his chair. He feels for the first time in 6 weeks that the thing bothering him has been correctly named. Dumbledore continues. His voice is careful and warm and carries the specific authority of a man who has thought more deeply about more difficult things than anyone Ron has ever met. He talks about the weight of power used without check, about the difference between capability and wisdom, about the people who have been hurt by the unchecked pursuit of correct objectives, about how Harry, for all his extraordinary qualities, is still 16 years old and may not yet have the perspective to understand what is lost when you build a system that does not include mercy as a load-bearing element. He does not say anything Ron can directly dispute. Ron walks back to Gryffindor Tower an hour later, feeling lighter than he has in weeks, not because anything has been resolved. The question still exists, the answer still hasn't arrived, but because someone has told him the question is worth asking, which felt, in the moment, like the same thing. The portrait outside Dumbledore's office is a landscape, a Scottish hillside, heather and grey sky, a figure in the middle distance who does not look like he is listening, but has been listening for 6 years. By morning, Hermione knows. She does not go to Harry with it. She sits with it for a day, at her desk in the library, in the Slytherin common room after hours, on the walk to Charms, not processing it, deciding what it requires. On the second day, she goes to the Black Library section she brought to Hogwarts. 6 volumes, carried in a trunk with extension charms, accessed only when the dormitory is empty. She finds the folder she prepared in October, the one labeled Ministry File Active. She opens it to the secondary section. She has had this document since August. She read it then and filed it, because it was not yet the right time for it, because information deployed before the recipient is positioned to use it properly is information wasted. She understood at the time that there would be a moment when Ron would need this specific document, and she has been waiting for the shape of that moment to arrive. It has arrived. She removes the relevant page. One sheet. Gringotts obtained through the archive of ministry correspondence that Gringotts holds as part of its financial oversight function. A function the ministry has never fully examined because examining it would require the ministry to know what Gringotts has access to, which would require reading a particular subclause of the Gringotts Charter that nobody has read until Hermione did. The document is a ministry internal memorandum from December 1981. It records a notification sent to Albus Dumbledore in his capacity as Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot, informing him that Sirius Orion Black, member of the Order of the Phoenix, had been imprisoned in Azkaban without trial. The notification was procedural. A flag from the Wizengamot's own administrative office, noting the absence of proper hearing, requesting the Chief Warlock's guidance on whether to convene a tribunal. Dumbledore's written response is attached. It is 2 paragraphs. The first acknowledges receipt. The second explains in the measured language of someone who has considered the matter fully why convening a tribunal would be inadvisable at this time. The reasoning is specific. The blood wards protecting Harry Potter at his new placement are keyed to family. Disruption of that placement, which a freed Sirius Black would inevitably cause as the named godfather, would compromise the single most important protective measure available for the boy's survival. The long-term strategic priority requires stability. A tribunal can be revisited when circumstances allow. The circumstances the file reflects were never revisited. Sirius Black remained in Azkaban for 12 years. The memorandum's date is December 4th, 1981. Sirius had been imprisoned for 5 weeks at the time of this exchange. Hermione writes 4 sentences at the bottom of the page, below the ministry letterhead, in her smallest script. She reads them back twice. She does not change anything, with her own owl addressed to Ron directly. No cover note, no explanation of the document, nothing but the single page and the 4 sentences at the bottom. Ron reads it in the common room after dinner. The fire is going. Seamus and Dean are playing Exploding Snap at the other table. He reads it once, quickly because 4 sentences do not take long to read. Then he reads it again. Slowly he chose the board over the pieces then. He's choosing it now. You are a piece, Ron. I say this because I love you. He sits with it for a long time. The fire does not ask him anything. The common room continues around him. Seamus wins the card game and says something that makes Dean laugh, and the normal texture of the world holds its shape undisturbed. Ron folds the letter, puts it in his pocket. He does not know, tonight, what he is going to do with this information. He does not know whether it changes his position or simply adds weight to the grief of a position he already holds. He knows that Hermione sent it because she loves him, that she means the last sentence exactly, that the 4 sentences together are not a weapon and not a closing argument. They are a door. She is leaving it open. The question of whether he walks through it is still his. He does it from the astronomy tower, on a night in September when the sky is clear enough that the stars are specific rather than general. He has been building toward this for 2 years. The King's sight has been present since the Death Chamber, since the moment in the Veil Room when the magical record recognized the Peverell air and he felt the architecture of death settle into his perception like a new language resolving into comprehension. He has been using it in increments since then. A brush of it here, a careful extension there. He found the diadem in the Room of Requirement in the 3rd week of Year 6 by letting the sight reach out along the castle's magical infrastructure until it found the specific signature he was looking for. He found the cup by working with the director's team through the Gringotts Vault Registry. But those were targeted searches. Single objects, known locations, confirmations rather than discoveries. Tonight he is opening it fully. He sits on the parapet with his back against the stone, and his eyes closed and his left hand resting open on his knee. He breathes. He lets the constructed parts of his awareness, the parts that categorize and respond and perform being present in a social space, go quiet. What remains beneath them is different. It perceives differently, not as sight, not as sound. It perceives anchoring, the specific signature of a soul that has been fixed to a container, a fractured piece of consciousness, wedded to an object or vessel by an act of violation, creating a knot in the magical record, where there should be clean continuity. Each one has a different quality. Each one occupies a specific location in the geography of Britain's magical infrastructure, and the infrastructure is old enough and coherent enough that a person who can read it the way you read a map. Not with the eyes, but with the same organ that understands scale and distance and the relationship between points. 5 signatures. The locket he already knows. found in the Black Library in August 1995. Sealed in the lead-lined box, identified over subsequent months, as Hermione read deeper into the soul theory sections of the Grey texts. Destroyed in December 1996, the first of the Horcruxes addressed, once Harry's dissolution capability was sufficiently developed, a piece of Salazar Slytherin's locket, and a piece of a soul that has been waiting in a box under containment wards for 16 months. The unmaking took 2 hours and left them both exhausted on the floor of the ritual vault. He does not find the locket's signature tonight. That knot is gone, clean and completely. He locates the ring quickly. The gaunt shack in Little Hangleton, a cold, tight signature old and stubborn, carrying the specific weight of an object that has been enchanted to resist detection and has been resisting it for decades regardless. He notes it and moves on. The cup is in a Gringotts vault, as he already knew. Its signature through the rock and wards of the bank is faint but present. A slightly sour quality to it, like metal that has been in contact with something it shouldn't be. The diadem is in the castle. He can feel it without moving. A third-floor signature emanating from the Room of Requirement, which he located in year 6 but has not yet addressed. It is old and patient. It has been waiting for 5 centuries and is not concerned about waiting a little longer. Nagini is in Wiltshire. The signature is large. A living vessel, a creature rather than an object, and the fragment inside her has the quality of something that has been there long enough to have grown into its container. The location is specific enough that he can identify the property. He has been to that property. That is 5. He stays with the site for a long time before he finds the 6th, not because it is distant, because it is so close that the site has been sliding past it the way your eyes slide past something in your peripheral vision, something too immediate to register as external. His scar. He does not move for a long time. He has known this was possible. Hermione surfaced the theory in August, cautiously, documented citing 3 separate sources from the Black Library, presenting it the way she presents everything she does not want to be right about. She did not ask him how he felt about it. She presented the evidence and waited. He told her then, it is a factor in the campaign, nothing more. He opens his eyes, the stars are still specific, the September air is cold and clean. He goes downstairs to find Hermione. The campaign runs from October to April. No camping, no improvisation, no nights spent hungry in a forest because the next step in the plan dissolved under pressure. Hermione had built the operational structure over the summer, updating it as Harry's mapping provided confirmed locations. Each target has a file. Each file contains the specific magical signature of the object, the physical location, the security measures documented through either Gringotts records or the portrait network or personal reconnaissance, and the specific methodology for destruction. Hermione handles the methodology. Harry handles the unmaking. The ring is October. They go to Little Hangleton on a Thursday, 2 weeks after Harry maps it. Hermione has spent those 2 weeks examining the curse Voldemort placed on the ring, a comprehensive and layered piece of dark architecture designed to kill or incapacitate anyone who attempts to wear or handle it. She approaches the ring with a stripping sequence derived from the Grey magic texts, 3 passes in specific order, which removes the curse's outer and middle layers cleanly. What remains is the soul fragment itself. Harry unmakes it the way he unmade the diadem 6 days prior, the way he has been learning to do since the death chamber, since the night he touched the architecture of death and found it legible. The Peverell sight reads the fragment, reads the knot of it, perceives the specific points at which it is bound to the ring. He applies the dissolution sequence, not wand work, not a spell with a name in any living language, but an application of will through the blood rite that the veil recognized 8 months ago. The ring goes cold, the fragment releases. Hermione notes the time in her file, 7 minutes from approach to completion. She marks it and closes the folder. The cup is November. Ragnarok's team has already isolated it in a containment chamber within the bank's primary vault structure. The methodology is Hermione's, a goblin-developed neutralization process that strips the magical binding without requiring the object's physical destruction. Harry contributes the unmaking. The director observes, notes something in his records, says nothing. The diadem is January, Room of Requirement. This one is the easiest. The room has been waiting for a recognized heir of the castle's founders to address it for centuries. It opens without resistance. The diadem is where the site said it was. The unmaking takes 9 minutes. 4 external Horcruxes down, 2 remaining. They address the problem of Harry himself in February. This is the conversation Hermione has been preparing for since September. since he came downstairs from the astronomy tower and told her about the 6th signature. She has spent 4 months in the gray magic texts looking for a solution that does not require his death, and she has found one, and it requires 3 things she has been collecting since October. He will not describe what the process feels like afterward, not in full. He will say once, to Hermione, "It is quieter," as if something that had been generating a low noise for 16 years has simply stopped. She marks it in the file, notes the time, closes the folder. They go to Malfoy Manor in April. The report from the Portrait Network places Nagini at the manor, Voldemort's base of operations since the Ministry's destabilization began. The property is warded. The wards are Lucius's work, maintained by a family that has been building them for 3 centuries, and they are considerable. But Lucius no longer has his wand certification. The wards are running on residual enchantment, decades of accumulated layering, with no one currently capable of maintaining them. They are intact but static. Hermione identified this in her reconnaissance notes in March. A ward that cannot be maintained begins to thin at its construction points. She had mapped the thin points in February. They walk through them. The manor's courtyard is gray stone and bare trees, in the specific silence of a house that knows it is being approached and has stopped performing hospitality. The front door is 30 feet ahead. Harry looks at it. He thinks, in 8 years he has broken into more places than he would have expected. He has moved through fear and improvisation and the desperate momentum of someone who does not have a plan. That version of himself feels very far away from the courtyard at Malfoy Manor in April, standing with his hands at his sides, and the sight confirming Nagini's position at the back of the ground floor, with nothing in him that resembles fear, and everything in him that resembles readiness. He walks to the front door. He knocks. The door opens. Narcissa Malfoy stands in the frame. She is dressed in gray, her pale hair pulled back, her posture carrying the residual quality of a woman who was, until recently, the mistress of a house that mattered. She looks at Harry, she looks at Hermione. Her gaze moves to the documents visible in Hermione's bag, the edge of the Sovereign Charter, goblin-forged seal catching the light. She takes in the information available to her. She is not a sentimental woman. She did not survive the First War, the long years between the wars and the Second War's opening phases, by attaching herself to positions after they had stopped being viable. She is a pragmatist of the First Order, and pragmatists read situations accurately, because inaccurate readings are expensive in ways that pragmatists cannot afford. She reads this situation accurately. She steps aside. She does not speak. She does not ask a question. She does not perform either defiance or welcome. She simply moves back from the doorway and looks at the far wall and lets the 2 crowned figures into her house, because even she can read the math. Harry walks in. Nagini is at the back of the ground floor, where the sight said she would be. He goes to find her. The staircases move first, not their usual and different rearrangement, the casual repositioning of a castle that has always treated its own architecture as provisional. They move with intention. The grand staircase shifts its lower section 40 degrees clockwise as the first Death Eaters breach the entrance hall doors, creating a wall of solid stone where a corridor was. 3 of them walk into it at speed. The 4th pulls up short, raises his wand, looks up at the staircase with the expression of a man revising his understanding of the environment, and finds that the understanding is not yet sufficient because the 2nd staircase has already moved behind him. He is not in a castle that is indifferent to the battle. He is in a castle that has chosen a side. From the astronomy tower, Harry watches the 3 forces converge on the grounds below. Voldemort's line comes from the north. 80 Death Eaters at its widest point, dark creatures at the flanks, giants contracted through older promises than the Ministry can counteroffer, werewolves whose loyalty is personal rather than institutional. The line moves with the particular confidence of a force that has not been seriously opposed in 2 years. At its center, a figure that does not need a torch, whose presence in the dark is sufficient to organize the space around it. Dumbledore's coalition comes from the west. Smaller, 40-odd Order members, Hogwarts staff, a contingent of Ministry Aurors who followed Amelia Bones rather than the Ministry's current structure, and whatever students are of age and have chosen to stay. The coalition is brave and genuine, and fighting for something real. It is also operating on a theory of the battle that does not account for the full board. The duo's forces are already inside. This is Hermione's contribution to the operational design, and it is the part that took the longest to explain to the Goblin Alliance. The Shadow Government's network of marked students has been in position since sunset, 37 people distributed across the castle, each holding a specific assignment, each with a direct line to either Harry or Hermione through the portrait network. They are not fighters in the conventional sense. They are points on a grid. When the battle's geography requires it, they close or open specific corridors, activate or deactivate specific ward nodes, redirect the castle's own enchantments toward the places where direction is needed. The goblin contribution is not in the castle, it is in the grounds. 40 goblins emerging from 3 points near the forest boundary, armed with the specific weapons of a species that fought wizards for centuries before settling into an uneasy peace, and equipped with the additional motivation of fighting alongside the only sovereign power that has ever offered them legal recognition. The battle has a center of gravity, and the center of gravity is not Voldemort. Harry turns from the parapet and goes downstairs. The 3 visions meet on the grounds and in the corridors simultaneously, and none of them resemble what any of the 3 forces expected. Voldemort's Death Eaters expected resistance in the pattern they have always known, the pattern of the First War, of panic-scattered defenders, of a castle that could be broken from without and cleaned from within. They encounter instead a castle that has categorically refused to be broken. The walls close passages, the floors redirect footsteps, the enchantments that have been dormant in the stones for 1,000 years are awake and discriminating. They can read intent. They were built to read intent, and they are opening for the goblins and closing for the Death Eaters, and the difference between the 2 groups is not something a Death Eater can simply override with a wand. Dumbledore's coalition expected to be the primary defensive force, the experienced fighters, the proven veterans, the people who have done this before. What they encounter instead is a battle that is already being managed by someone else. Corridors are controlled by the time they reach them. Dead ends are created precisely where dead ends are needed. When a Death Eater breaks through an order position on the 2nd floor, the portrait network has already redirected a response before Dumbledore can coordinate one. He understands this. On the 3rd floor, when he turns to issue an instruction to a member of the Order and finds that the instruction has already been carried out, he stands in the corridor for a moment and recalculates. The battle he is fighting is not the battle he prepared for. He is not the architect of this response. He is a participant in someone else's design. The recognition is swift and comprehensive, and it settles into his expression with the quality of a man arriving at a conclusion he had the information for some time ago, but declined to draw. Harry moves through the battle the way he has moved through everything since the Blood Pact, without anger, without performance. He does not need to be everywhere. He needs to be in the specific places where his presence changes the local outcome, and the portrait network tells him where those places are. He finds Voldemort at the entrance to the Great Hall at 11 o'clock, or rather, Voldemort finds him. He turns a corner on the ground floor, and they are 15 feet apart, and the corridor goes absolutely quiet the way corridors do when 2 things that have been moving toward each other for 3 years finally stop moving and face what the movement was about. He doesn't look like what Harry expected. He looks like a man, not the monstrous reconstruction Harry saw in the graveyard. That version had the theatrical quality of a person who had designed his own appearance for maximum effect. This is different. The Horcruxes are gone. All of them, including the fragment that used to live behind Harry's scar. And without them, Voldemort is reduced to what he always was, a very powerful wizard who has been paying the cost of soul fracture for 50 years and now holds a debt he cannot discharge. Mortal. For the first time in living memory, he is aware of it. Harry can see the awareness in his posture, the slight recalibration of a man who has spent decades standing inside an architecture of invulnerability and now feels the cold of a room without walls. The duel is not lengthy. It is not the spectacular exchange of equal powers from canon, 2 wands, 2 traditions, the ghosts of shared ancestry. It is something more angular than that. Voldemort fights with the full weight of his considerable ability, and his ability is genuine and substantial, and he lands 3 curses that would have destroyed a less prepared opponent. Harry is not a less prepared opponent. He has been learning the architecture of death for 2 years. He has read the foundation of it from the inside. What Voldemort casts at him is powerful, but it is power organized by a mind that understands death as an endpoint, as a terminus, as a destination to be inflicted. Harry understands it differently. He has been to the threshold and back, and what he carries from that is not immunity but literacy. He reads the curses, he steps aside from 3 of them in the specific way you step aside from things you understand rather than fear. On the 4th exchange, he does not step aside. He applies the dissolution, not at the curse, but at the source. At the will behind it, a fractured soul has weak points. All structures have weak points, and fractured structures have more than intact ones. He perceives the fracture lines in Voldemort's soul the way he perceived the fracture lines in each Horcrux before he unmade them. He does not need to kill him, he needs to read him. The magic does the rest. He does not see Ron until it is almost too late. The second front of the battle is on the other side of the castle, in the east corridor, where Hermione is coordinating the final repositioning of the ward nodes, with 2 marked students. The corridor is quiet by the time she arrives. The goblin line has pushed the Death Eater position back through the library approach, and the east section of the castle is effectively secured. What she does not account for is the Order member in the stairwell above. He is young, 23-24. She has never met him. His name will be in the records later, a man who received orders from a chain of command that told him, in the confusion of a night that had been building for 2 years, that the 2 figures at the castle's center were dark actors whose Gringotts claims were fraudulent and whose shadow operation had been infiltrating the Order for months. He believes this. He has been told by someone he trusts. He steps out of the stairwell doorway above the east corridor, looks down, identifies Hermione by the Gringotts charter visible at her side, and makes the decision of a man who believes he is protecting the light. He casts. The killing curse takes a green parabola through the corridor. Hermione's back is turned. She does not hear it in time to move. What happens next happens in a single second, which is the only amount of time it requires. Ron comes from the corridor's far end. He has been running from the entrance hall, directed here by a portrait message, by the specific and urgent intelligence of a network that he made the decision to trust sometime in February and has not unmade since. He is not a trained fighter in the way that Harry and Hermione are trained fighters. He has not had 3 years of systematic preparation, has not held the Founder's Charter in his hands. What he has is speed and a very clear understanding of what matters. He steps in front of it. What the curse meets is not a ward in the architectural sense, not gray magic mechanics or a constructed barrier. What it meets is something far older than any technique Hermione has studied. In the autumn of Year 5, over the course of several quiet evenings in the Slytherin common room, she inscribed a protection into the lining of Ron's school robes. She did it because she loved him and could not say so in any language available to her at 15, and because love offered freely and without condition has been the most powerful protective magic in the world, since a woman named Lily stood between a killing curse and her son, and the curse found it had nowhere to go. Hermione's protection of Ron is built from the same material. Not a ward, a sacrifice, encoded the freely given care of one person for another, written into the fabric of what he wears closest to his body, asking nothing in return. The killing curse strikes it and finds, as it has always found when it meets this specific magic, that the mathematics do not work. Love given without condition cannot be killed by force. The principle has not changed since 1981. The curse disperses. Ron hits the corridor floor hard, unconscious, the deflected energy moving through his body's own magical field in a way that is survivable but not comfortable. He does not die. He wakes in the corridor with Hermione's hand on his shoulder and the east wing quieter around them than a castle mid-battle should be. He lies on the stone floor and looks at the ceiling for a moment. "You warded me," he says. His voice is flat, not accusatory, processing. Yes. Without asking. Yes. He is quiet for a moment. He turns this over. He examines it from every angle he can reach from the floor of the east corridor with a dispersed killing curse still vibrating through his ribcage. "You would have refused," she says. He is quiet for a long time. He thinks about Chapter 4's cold line in the corridor, the one he spent 2 weeks unable to counter-argue. He thinks about the letter in February. He thinks about the 11 minutes in the Gringotts conference room that he was not in, and the coronation he was not at, and the purge that he watched from the distance of someone who could see the targets were right and still couldn't fully accept the mechanism. He thinks about the protection she put on him in October 1995, quietly, without a word, asking nothing from him in return. He thinks about what that is, stripped of all complexity, stripped of the gray magic framing and the strategic architecture. Someone who loves you, doing what she could to keep you alive. He cannot find what's wrong with it. "Yeah," he says finally, "I would have." He lets her help him sit up. The battle is not over. He can hear it through the castle walls, the specific sounds of a conflict in its final phase, converging on a conclusion rather than expanding from one. But in the east corridor it is quiet, and for this moment the quiet is sufficient. He looks at her, she looks at him. 12 years of friendship, and the specific weight of the last 3, and the letter she sent in February that she has not mentioned since, and the protection she placed without apology for placing it. "All right," he says. Not to all of it, not yet. To the corridor, to the moment, to the fact that they are both in it and both alive. "All right," Hermione says. She hands him his wand, which she picked up from the floor when he fell. He takes it. They stand. The Great Hall, Hogwarts, May 3rd, 1998. Before dawn, Tom Riddle does not die violently. This is the thing that surprises the people who witness it. Not that it happens, but the quality of how it happens. They expected something proportionate to the fear he generated for 50 years. Something with scale. Something that announced itself. What they witness instead is a man running out of reasons to continue. He is on the ground floor of the East Wing when Harry applies the final dissolution. When the Peverell sight reads the last remaining fracture lines in a soul that has been choosing fragmentation over wholeness since 1943, and the magic touches those lines not with force, but with comprehension. The way you comprehend the load-bearing logic of a building, and then understand structurally that the load-bearing element has been removed. Harry does not kill him. Harry simply perceives, accurately, what he is. A thing that chose to become less than itself, repeatedly, until what remained was insufficient to persist. The soul that fragmented rather than remain whole has nothing left to fragment into. It ceases. Tom Riddle's body settles onto the stone floor, with the particular quietness of an object that has become inert. No dark smoke, no final declaration, no spectacular dissolution into something larger. He was a very powerful wizard who made a specific series of irreversible decisions, and at the end of those decisions there is simply the East Wing floor, and the absence of motion and the distant sounds of a battle entering its final phase without him. Harry stands in the corridor for a moment. Then he goes to the Great Hall. The battle ends in the way that battles end when one of the 3 forces has already ceased to exist. The Death Eaters, whose structure was personal loyalty rather than institutional, begin to break almost immediately. Some surrender. Some flee. The Goblin line takes the surrender points with the particular efficiency of a force that planned for this contingency and has the paperwork ready. By the time full dawn comes through the castle's east windows, the grounds are held. The Great Hall is not intact. 2 of its walls have sustained damage from the night's fighting. The enchanted ceiling has gone dark, not permanently, just in the way that ancient enchantments go dark when the magic around them has been too turbulent for too long, needing time to settle before they can operate again. The longhouse tables have been moved to the walls to create a central clearing. People sit against the stone wherever there is space. Healers from St. Mungo's are already inside, directed by the portrait network before the last curse was cast. Harry finds Hermione at the center of the hall, standing with her folder open, directing the post-battle coordination with the same attention she brings to everything. Ron is beside her, sitting on the edge of a displaced table. He looks like a man who has been hit with the deflection of a killing curse, which is because he is, but he is present and focused and watching Hermione work with the expression of someone who has finished a long argument with himself. Dumbledore is at the far end of the hall. He is standing alone near the staff table which has been pushed back against the wall. He is dressed in the deep blue robes from the night before, which are disordered now, a sleeve torn, his half-moon spectacles slightly askew. He looks older than Harry has ever seen him, not physically. Something underneath the physical. He looks like a man who has been the most prepared person in any room for 60 years, and is now standing in the aftermath of a night that he did not design. He watches Harry and Hermione approach. He does not speak first. "He's gone," Harry says. "It is not delivered with satisfaction. It is information." "I know," Dumbledore says. Hermione opens her folder. She removes a document, 12 pages, formal, dense with the signatures of Wizengamot members who were in the castle and survived the night. She had prepared it in March, knowing this moment would arrive in whatever form it arrived in, knowing there would be a day after the battle, and that the day after required a different architecture than the battle itself. She holds it out. Dumbledore takes it. He reads the first page, which contains the substance. The rest is documentation. The Retirement Charter. A formal recognition of Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore's service to the magical community of Britain, his contributions to education, his role in 2 wizarding wars, a formal notation that his current roles, Headmaster, Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot, Supreme Mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, are hereby considered vacated, effective this date, at his own discretion. A provision for him to remain at Hogwarts in a private scholarly capacity, with full access to the library and the resources of his office, with no obligation to the institutions he is leaving and no claim those institutions retain over him. A door, unguarded, held open. He reads it for a long time. "You could have made this something else," he says. His voice is quiet, not a complaint, an observation. "Yes," Hermione says. "You chose not to." "We chose not to," Harry says. Dumbledore looks at him, the specific look of a man taking careful measure of something he has been measuring incorrectly for 3 years, and is now calibrating against new data. There is something in his expression that is not an apology, exactly. Too late for an apology, too much water under that bridge, but is in the same register, an acknowledgement. The look of a man who can see, finally and fully, the shape of his own errors from the outside. "I hope," he says, "that you will allow me to see what you build." "That's up to you," Harry says. The door is open. Places it in the inside pocket of his robes. "Yes," he says. "I suppose it is." He walks to the hall's side exit. Without ceremony, he does not look back. The door closes. The stone chairs are not in the Great Hall by design. They are in the Great Hall because Rowena Ravenclaw placed them there in 993, before the long tables existed, before the sorting hat existed, before any of the institutional apparatus of Hogwarts developed around them. They were the original governance seats of the castle. 2 chairs of gray stone, plain, functional, built into a recessed alcove on the hall's north wall behind where the staff table usually sits. Most people who eat in the Great Hall every day for 7 years do not notice them. They are behind the staff table. They are the color of the wall. They do not present themselves. They are present now. The staff table has been moved. The alcove is visible. Harry and Hermione walk to it without discussion. This was also planned. Everything is planned. Has been planned since the Black Library, since the Blood Pact, since 2 15-year-olds sat in a room that smelled of leather and old decisions and agreed to be architects rather than instruments. They sit. The chairs are exactly what they look like. Stone, practical, built for people who intend to work rather than to be regarded. They are not warm. They do not offer comfort in the physical sense. But the moment Harry and Hermione sit in them, something in the hall's magic changes in the way that the East Wing changed in the Death Chamber. The ancient enchantments in the stones settling into a configuration they have been waiting for. The castle, which has been choosing a side since the staircases moved in the first minute of the battle, grows very still. Ron sits on the step below the alcove, not in a chair. Beside them, he does not say anything for a moment. He looks at the hall, at the damaged walls, the dark ceiling, the healers moving between survivors, the goblin delegation near the entrance organizing their own post-battle accounting. "What happens now?" he asks. "Now we work," Hermione says. She takes the ministry file from her folder. The complete Black family ledger, the full 847 years of documented corruption, payments made and outcomes purchased across every ministry department since 1891. She has been building toward this since the night she found it in the northeast corner of the Black Library, when she opened a plain dark cloth book expecting inventory records and found a column of names instead. She has prepared it for distribution. Copies made by the Gringotts Reproduction Service, 42 total, addressed to every wizarding newspaper in Britain and 3 international publications held at the Gringotts main branch pending a single instruction. She takes out a piece of parchment. She writes 4 words, "Release on my authority." She signs it, silver ink. She folds it and gives it to a portrait figure in the frame nearest the alcove, one of the Hogwarts founders, a woman with gray eyes who has been watching the entire night with the expression of someone deeply satisfied by a conclusion she has been anticipating for a long time. The portrait figure takes the note and steps out of the frame. Within the hour, every wizarding newspaper in Britain receives a package from Gringotts. 42 packages identical, each containing the complete ledger with a notation that its contents have been verified by Gringotts' own archival division and carry the Sovereign Charter's authentication. The age of restoration begins not with a feast, it begins with a reckoning. The Great Hall empties slowly around them as the morning continues. The healers move their patients. The Goblin delegation completes its accounting and departs through the main doors. The surviving Order members find each other and begin the necessary conversations about what comes next. The castle's enchanted ceiling comes back gradually, not all at once. Section by section, the stars replaced by the particular gray-blue of a May morning moving toward full light. Harry looks at it. He thinks about the summer of 1995, in the Black Library, with a lamp burning low, and Hermione's list on the table between them, and the certainty of two people who had decided to stop being managed. He thinks about the cost between then and now, Sirius in the death chamber, the months of work, the night just past, the thing he will carry from the East Wing floor for the rest of his life. He thinks about what they have built. Ron is still on the step. He has not asked to leave. He is eating a piece of bread that someone pressed into his hand an hour ago without asking, and he is watching the healers work, and he has the specific quiet of a person who has come through a long tunnel and is not yet ready to talk about the other side but is present in it. Hermione is writing. She is always writing. The Great Hall holds the morning and the wreckage, and the beginning of the thing they have been pointing toward for 3 years. There was, for the first time in living memory, no one left to be afraid of. They weren't sure what to do with that yet, but they had time. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.